and boost on all flexed entries. So don't miss your chance to try it out before it is gone, folks. Hop on over to Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code TCESGPN to claim your special pick plus first time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. And yes, they do a great job of covering college football. Obviously, the games aren't there yet, but the closer we get to the season, they are just fantastic at covering college football. So underdogfantasy.com, promo code TCESGPN. All right. We are back. And look, and I'm going to just jump right into this. It was great. It was an honor for me to sit down with Dan Wetzel to talk about the future of college football, the looming 12-team playoff, and everything else going on in this crazy, wacky sport that we love so much. So with no further ado, here is the great Dan Wetzel. Joining me on the College Football Experience is, the host of the College Football Inquirer podcast, which I highly recommend, but also author, screenwriter, documentary, film producer, podcaster, national columnist for Yahoo Sports, Dan Wetzel. How you doing, Dan? I appreciate you hopping on the College Football Experience to talk a little college football.
Great to be on, Colby. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, and look, you're the College Football Inquirer. I gotta give, like, a lot of times there are competitors I don't want to go out there and get, but I love your guys' show, and I think you do such a great job hosting. And it's crazy as a guy that's done stand-up comedy for 20 years. Did you ever do stand-up? Because I feel like you are great with just punchlines and jokes and everything, man. Have you ever tried stand-up comedy?
No, I've not tried stand. That's a hard. You've done it. 20
I've been
years?
doing it for 20 years, and there's a reason why I'm doing this.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Well,
at this point, I think if I did a stand-up, I would no longer I'd be like canceled, right? Like, I don't think you can do stand-up comedy and then try to operate in the
world we're living in.
Yeah. I think it's like one or the other you got to go with. So probably for the best, I never did it. But I don't know. I don't have that kind of courage or ability or anything like that. So tip my hat to you.
Well, no, look, your show, I find highly. Look, I listen to all these other college football shows, but I really enjoy the humor involved with your show, and mainly I think that the other guys are great too. But I'm saying I think it comes from you, and that's why I had to ask that question, because I was like, man, I feel like this guy's got to have a background in comedy or something. But
we like having fun with it. Look, college football's fun. We're all reporters. We've all done investigative reporting. We write serious issues, all that. But at the end of the day, college football is about having a good time. This is not, we're not war correspondents. Nothing, and the sport is so wonderfully absurd. The scandals are absurd, the controversies, the rivalries, the things that people say, every bit of it is fun. So, we want to have a good time with it. Also, so much of it gets bogged down into, the minutia of the House case and this legislation and this NCAA rule and all of that. You want to keep that light and try to make it presentable. And then I'm not the guy who's going to sit there and tell you, hey, Mississippi State's, too deep in the secondary is so good this year. It's gonna get them from 5 wins to 6. That's not me anyway. So might as well enjoy all the other spectacle, the drinking, the absurdity, the fun parts of college football.
Hey, like, that sounds a lot like what we do here to a certain extent, but you guys do get into, covering, in Washington DC, Capitol Hill. I feel like where that thing goes over my head, where I'm just like, yeah, let me listen to these guys. They know what they're talking about. But obviously, and what crazy time period is this current time period for college athletics in general? Is this in your career? Would you say this is the craziest time period for college sports?
There's the most structural changes. No question. Part of that is the conference realignment. I think there's always been conference realignment, but this much change, an 18-team Big Ten with 4 teams on the Western flank and the ACC and, having Cal and Stanford in it and SMU, just so many, there was always absurdities. It's gotten to be, truly absurd. So the television network control and trying to get the conferences smaller conferences, they can set up more good games for their purposes. I think that's a big part of it. And then, we felt the NCAA, we've been very critical of the way the NCAA handled the transfer portal, both when the coaches had too much power and then when they just seeded everything and they had committees. That's been an issue. And then the NIL and the compensation. Overall, it's going to be a jarring year. And then you got the playoff too, right, this year. So there's a lot of different things. It's jarring. I prefer the Pac-12 still in existence and things like that. But I also think the sport's never been better. It hasn't been this good and this competitive and this much going on in a long time. So I'm not one of these doom and gloom people. If you listen to the podcast, the powers that be are always crying that everything's horrible. Change is terrible. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And I'm aware I could have more people listen to our podcast if we went along that line. People tend to listen to, how terrible things are, right? Bad news does better than good news. I just don't see it that way. I think it's going to be an incredible season and a really exciting one with the playoff and the video game. And I've argued from the start that NIL would flatten the playing field a little bit, the competitive balance, certainly at the top more than what they were always crying about.
Yeah, and look, you wrote a book called Death of the BCS. So we were fast friends a long time ago.
Yeah.
I feel like go check out. You've written several books. I got the Tarkanian book here, which I love.
There you go.
But I think I'm in the middle in a way. Like I obviously would like the Pac-12, but I do think this is the most interesting college football season I can recall in my lifetime. Me and my co-host were talking the other day just around the water cooler there and just talking. Hey man, there's like 60 teams that I think should be optimistic about their chances of going to the playoffs this year. Now, obviously we're going to have 12 teams, but to me, there's about 55, 60 teams where I think you can build the case where they could be in the playoff. And I think that I really push back. And even I know, I think, a lot of the narrative out there is that the regular season's watered down. Now we do this exercise where we draft like 30 games every week. In the off season, we go, 1 through 14, draft the top 30 games where I feel like the games, maybe they're not as deep because they've done like Georgia, Texas. And for every one of those, you get Indiana and UCLA or something. But I do feel like the games all have a bigger meaning now that you have so many teams that are capable of making the playoff. Do you think that's accurate?
Absolutely. More games will matter more. That's what happens. The whole idea that, the regular season mattered more when you could get knocked out in week 2, like the old system. It certainly put high stakes on a thing, but then it totally eliminated teams from competition. So a playoff was always better. But even 5 or 6 years ago, you go into a season saying, yeah, there's like 3 teams going to win the national title. There's like 5 maybe. I think Georgia and Ohio State on paper look really good, but like you said, yeah, there might be 60 teams that could make a playoff. I mean, that's a significant season. I look at a team like Tennessee, right? They've got a great defense. They've got an up and coming offense, star quarterback and all that, but they've got they're at Oklahoma, they're at Georgia, they got Alabama, they got a tough schedule. If this was a 4-team playoff or the old, what do I think they could run the table? Maybe, but that would be an incredible year. Now I look at them and go, oh yeah, they can be in the playoff. Heck, maybe they can host a game. Maybe they could have a game in Neyland Stadium or something like that. Like what quantifies a great season for some of these teams is a little different. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that is the kind of stuff that would build excitement at a place like that all season long. And they'll be playing, if you project it out, probably meaningful games deep into November and maybe even into December in the playoffs. So there's so many more teams with a chance. It's going to be good. Like the worst, college football, I don't know a sport that's worse at promoting itself. Okay. The coaches and the athletic directors and the commissioners sit around and tell the fans everything is terrible. That's all they talk about. Oh my God, it's the worst. We can't do this. It's awful. Nick say I gotta retire. Oh man, like you retired because you're like it was time to retire, right? Like everything's terrible. And they've told fans, I used this on our pod, but I was talking to an older Michigan fan, and he was saying, it's just NIL and the transfer portal has absolutely been terrible for college football. And I go, that's why you just won the national title. Like you were able to keep your guys like Blake Corum and Cornelius Johnson and on Zach Zinner because you had the 1 more year fund and you're able to pay them and they stayed rather than go become mid-round draft picks. And you were able to fill gaps in your roster with transfers. And you had a team that could go win a national title. Michigan has won half a national title since the 1940s. Okay. They really were never competitive at that level. And yet this allowed them, because Michigan isn't, before this, you had to rack up basically 4 straight top 5 recruiting classes or something really close to that. And to do that, you had to be one of a few schools. And if you couldn't do that, you weren't going to have the ability to have players. So it's not that the transfer portal or NIL allows, it's a flat system. Like, the NFL probably does the best they can, best of any league possible to try to create every team's got a chance, right? It's not like that, but it's flatter. There's way more teams at the top that can now assemble a group to win a national title. And that's why we went from the exact same 3 or 4 teams to all of a sudden Washington and Michigan sitting in the national championship game. And so I look at the whole sport as this is, I understand a coach being frustrated. I'd be like, man, this is tough building my roster. I don't get as much. You're also getting, Bo Schembechler and those guys that weren't making, $8 million a year. I mean, you get paid a lot of money to do this job. It's a hard job. I get the frustrations of the coaches. I get the frustration of fans when people transfer. But when you look at the overall arc of it, this sport is healthier and more competitive at the top and should be more exciting this year than it has been in as long as I can remember. And that's what's exciting to me. And so I wish more coaches and ADs, these people are saying that instead of telling their hardcore fans, this sport's doomed. It's a disaster. Everything's horrible. They're doing a disservice to the sport.
I completely agree. And I think another thing is like schedule discrepancies. I can remember, doing a deep dive on some of this stuff. Like the conferences always try to protect, I feel like, the better teams. Now, it doesn't mean they have to, like Alabama still plays a difficult schedule, but that bye week's at a good spot. Traditionally, I remember Iowa State and Arkansas. You feel like Iowa State and Arkansas gets like 3 road games in a row some years. Yeah. You're like, what? How does this fare? So I think just getting them a chance at the table. Now I'm with you though. I know you lobbied for this a long time ago, and I think it would have been a little better with shorter conferences and auto bids with those conferences, because I think we are in a spot. I know you guys were talking about this, and I wish I could have been a part of that conversation, because I was sitting there saying, I don't think we're going to have as many rematches as you guys think, because the conferences are so big. A perfect example, I think, last season, and the conferences weren't even as big last season, but I took a future on Louisville. I took a future on Oklahoma State, both to make to win their championships. Both didn't work out, but they got to the championship game. And that was basically based off of, I thought the schedule was just so easy for them, as opposed to, do I think Louisville's the second best team in the ACC? No, I don't. Do I think Oklahoma State? No, I don't. So I think that's going to be an issue. And I actually think that they're going to expand right away, because, like, take, for example, Texas playing Texas A&M the final game of the season. I think Texas A&M's got a pretty decent schedule, pretty easy schedule considering the SEC. Whereas Texas, Texas has the Red River Shootout. They have the Georgia game at Michigan. I think Texas A&M could end up, essentially beating Texas in the final game of the season, playing for potentially an SEC championship, and Texas be on the outside of this thing. And is it fair? Not at all. So I think that's going to happen more than people realize. How do you feel about my statement there?
Yeah, I like that. I'd have to look at the schedules, but you're right. Like, you used to be able to look and say, all right, who's coming out of the Big Ten West, right? We know Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State are probably the 3 best teams in this conference, but only one can come out of the East. So you look and all right, maybe it's Wisconsin, maybe it's Iowa, whatever. Now it's not a conference, but you're sitting there saying, who's got the schedule? Yeah. Who does it line up for? So it might be Minnesota. It could be Michigan State. It could be whatever. And I think that's a really good point. And so is that one able to sliver in? Texas A&M is a perfect example.
And that's going to be a problem, I think, and that's why I think they're probably going to end up expanding anyway, more money too. But you look at historically, even like look at the Big 12. You know, I know they went through a little bit of an era where they didn't have a championship game, but even I think we have 10 years of them bringing it back, or right around there. Oklahoma and Texas only played once. A lot of that due to tiebreaker stuff. You know, like Oklahoma, I think could have made it last year, or 2 years ago, but they had the tiebreaker, and Kansas State ends up getting in. So I do think that's going to be like Ohio State and Michigan, as much as they're probably going to be the two best teams a lot of years. I don't think we're going to see them in the Big Ten championship as often as most think.
You're probably right. And you know what I think with the rematches is I'm just not a real big conference championship game fan, especially with a playoff where both teams would make it anyway, but whatever. I think what happens in college sports is anytime there is something new, it's someone screaming that it's bad, right? So rematches are bad. I have no problem with rematches in the playoffs. I have no problem really with rematches in the conference championship game. Last year, Oregon and Washington playing a second time was really exciting. I mean, we knew going in, it was a great game the first time, it was a great game the second time. My only fear with the conference championship rematch was like last year, and maybe this can't be done with, you know, this will, like you said, it'll be done less with 18 teams when an Oregon's sitting there going, well, we're already in or something. But if you go into Michigan, Ohio State, and both teams know they're going to play a week later, that's weird. Now, if you have a game in the middle of the season and there's a potential of a rematch, that's no big deal. The game is going to be played. So it'll probably be very small amounts of time. But that has been a thing like, oh my God, there's a rematch. Like it's okay. It's going to be great. These are great teams that are going to play each other again. It's not going to really take any of the enjoyment out of an October game just because they might both play again. And we've had you know, Georgia, Alabama's had rematches in the playoff. LSU, Alabama's had rematches in the playoffs. So it's all possible. I agree. And probably you've got the right analytical look. And that's kind of what we did in Death to the BCS when I wrote that book, was they would throw out these kind of red meat scare tactics. Like, you know, I remember one of them was a team they literally said like Ohio State would rest its starters against Michigan, you know, and because they didn't need it if there was a playoff and they need to win. And it's like, no, that's not going. It's not. Do you know anything about college football? That's not going to happen. But we would go through and analyze it and get the numerics of it. Like, well, this actually never actually happens, but you think it. So I think it's an excellent point by you.
A few other things I wanted to ask you on, like, you know, everyone's talking group of five. We got a seat at the table this year for like someone like me, an East Carolina fan. You know, we've been asking for this for a long time, whether I was lobbying for UCF. I was saying claim every national championship. There's a bunch of phony national championships out there. Sure. Anybody undefeated, anyone 12-1, claim it. You need a form. Let me know. SGPN.
There are two lost teams that have claimed. I think Alabama's got a 2-losser, right?
Yeah. There's one at like 70 also. I think 71 with Texas like loses to Notre Dame in essentially the national championship. But they're like, no, we still won the national championship.
Yeah.
It's just a hilarious part of the sport. But the Pac-2, all right. Washington State gave us kind of our first big break. Mike Leach, rest in peace. And you know, our hearts are forever with Washington State because they did that. And you know, everyone's mentioning the group of five, and maybe you know this answer and I don't, but I'm sitting there like everyone's saying Liberty, everyone's talking Memphis, UTSA, you know, Boise State. Does Washington State and Oregon State qualify for that? Because if so, their strength of schedule, because they have more Power Fives on there, I feel like is substantially better than almost everybody else's in the group of five. Do you know the answer to that by chance?
It's my understanding they would have to qualify as an at-large bid. So because you have to have a certain number of teams in your league to be deemed a conference champion, and 2 is not it. I think they put that in because the other thing you could do is have like Notre Dame could form its own conference with like UMass and just like pay off UMass or UConn to be like, we'll come play you every other year, right? And that would probably be enough for either of those teams to you just have a 2-man conference, and Notre Dame would win the conference every single year, right? So you have to have a certain number of teams. So I don't believe they are eligible for that 5th automatic bid, but they are eligible for one of the 7 at-large spots, obviously.
Interesting, because they play a bunch. They have that tie-in with the Mountain West, but they do play more Power Fives than most of those schools. So that's why I was like, I was like, could Washington State make the playoff before Washington, which would be hilarious.
But you bring up a good point with the group of 5, and I've been saying this, and people are like, oh, it's the worst for these schools and all. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, NIL's tough for them, and how do you win a recruiting war when you don't have as much money? Like, when did they ever win a recruiting? When did East Carolina ever beat Clemson for a recruit?
Yeah.
Like, it never happened, right? Yeah. You technically can now. If you want to pool all your money and go after one kid, you could probably get them. You also can get transfers and all that, but they have a tangible road to the playoff, and those games are going to be so, whether it's Mountain West or Conference USA or the American or whatever, the MAC, it's going to be really exciting, and people around the country are going to have a reason to care because they could get into that spot. And yeah, are they going to win a game as the 12 seed? Probably not, but so what? Like, they're in. This would be unbelievable moments. You see it all the time in basketball, and I know it's a different sport, but someone wins the Northeast Conference and all the kids run out in the court and it's exciting. We made the tour. We're in the big dance, right? Who cares? It's a big deal for these schools. And you tell me, if East Carolina is going to play Notre Dame in a playoff game, because they've earned that G5 bid, and they get to go play Notre Dame on national TV in a first round game at Notre Dame, who's the 5 seed. How big of a game is that in East Carolina history?
Oh,
the biggest ever?
I mean, yeah, I'm maxing out a credit card just to get there. You know what I mean?
Insane, right? Just the chance.
Yeah.
Just the chance. And we now have that. I think that's completely underrated of all this stuff. This sport, for some reason, they've convinced fans to care about revenue. And we make more TV revenue than we got more distribution. And it's like that. At least that's what they get everyone to talk about and care about. And it's like, how about you win? You have a chance. I think this is great for Group of 5. I think it's an unbelievable opportunity for Group of 5. Much better than getting a New Year's 6 bowl bid, but it's way better than getting just left out. Utah one year went perfect. They had a perfect season. They had Alex Smith, the number 1 pick in the draft. They had Urban Meyer as their head coach, and they didn't get to do anything. They finished 6th in the rankings. Imagine that
team too. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine a Boise team. So imagine you got the number 1 draft pick in the NFL as your quarterback.
Yeah.
You might be able to win a game, and you got Urban Meyer as your coach. Dan Mullen was the QB coach. That team was loaded. Now, obviously, Utah is no longer on the outs, but who knows what can happen? And you get a team. Yeah, maybe if they any Group of 5 team that springs the upset, it's going to be. I think people liked Oakland University basketball or St. Peter's basketball. Football would be incredible if they ever pull an upset off.
Oh, I think it will happen. It's because another thing is it's disorganized a little bit. So one conference, let's say the Big 12 wins, a 3-loss Big 12 team wins the Big 12 this year. Well, they get that bye week where it kind of screws up the order for how you're going to play these games. And to me, it just always will leave a chance. And also, I just believe that yes, the best Group of 5 teams also just recently came up, like UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati, and Utah and TCU not long ago, but someone else will come. I saw Memphis big donation, and Memphis UTSA seems to be coming up. It just seems like, you can do this as many times as you want. Some team's going to lose the games in the conferences, and some team's going to emerge from these other conferences, even though it's a new AAC that looks like the Conference USA or a Mountain West or Pac-2, whatever. I think in general that it's going to eventually happen. I'm not saying this year, but I bet you in the next 5 years, 10 years, we'll have one where it happens. Yeah. A couple other things I wanted to ask you before you get you out of here, but this is a good question that someone brought up to me was, do you think the Mountain West will capitalize and become stronger because there is the West Coast Pacific time? I'm in Los Angeles, so Pacific time those games are all, all those UCLA, USC, Oregon, a lot of those games, if you look at the times that we've seen so far that have been released, a lot of them, they throw a Friday night game on, some like Oregon at Purdue, Maryland, USC, Maryland. I think they might have a point when they asked me this question. Can the Mountain West capitalize? Because what's going to be on late at night? A perfect example, Indiana, UCLA, I think is like a 3:30 kick, where I feel like traditionally we would get Arizona State, UCLA at night. I think there's less games at night, and can the Mountain West capitalize on that, you think?
I think it helps. I mean, I agree. There's less games featuring West Coast teams will be in that time slot, right? Which would be 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 p.m. type thing in West Coast time, Western time, Pacific time. And so, sure, if there's games you want to watch, and look, I mean, San Jose State, San Diego State, UNLV, Boise, Fresno, these teams aren't recruiting nationally. They're mainly recruiting in the region, mainly in California. So if you're the one, look, if Fresno State's out there recruiting in California and said, look, we've got 4 prime time, like 4, 6, who knows, right? Games prime time where your friends and family will be able to watch you. That can't hurt, right? It can't hurt. And adding that and be like, we're the West Coast League, sure. And at that level, you're just trying to keep a few more guys from taking off somewhere else. So the more you identify and more you can show recruits, transfers, whatever, that this is a good brand of football. And, this university, we're not in the big league, but you can do incredible stuff here in San Diego State or Fresno State or any of these places. I don't see how that necessarily is a negative. I think the in terms of the footprint being the West Coast, they're the top league now.
Yeah, and look, when I first moved out to Los Angeles, I bartended, and the amount of people that are just on a Saturday night coming into a bar wanting to watch a football game. Normally you'd have, a good Pac-12 game or something like that. So I think that maybe not like in 1 year, but over years adding up, it can really potentially grow as a conference. But what one more question. What do you think becomes of the Pac-2?
I guess eventually there's some merger with the Mountain West would be my guess in the long term. But right now they have so much money and so many resources, both in like NCAA tournament payouts coming and some different things, that just staying as is probably won't hurt them. I mean, if you're going to go, my guess would be, I mean, they could go to the Mountain West right now and try to win the conference and get that automatic bid. That's kind of the only thing. But I think for the most part, I think eventually they'll go there, but right now it's okay to kind of stay as is. But
yeah, I think
we can't have a 2-man league, and so might as well.
They got a TV contract though with the C-Dub.
Hey, All-American, they already got that. They got, I don't know if you ever watched that show, Golden Angels University. Spencer,
there we go.
Spencer James, let's go, let's play it. No, I mean, yeah, C-Dub. Yeah, everyone laughs at it, but it's on. Hey, show the game.
Easier than the Pac-12 network. You got to be in New Delhi to get the Pac-12 network. Yeah. But one other thing, Big 12. I don't think this is official or anything. I just think there. Yesterday, I think it was everywhere that private equity potentially coming into the Big 12 that could, give 20%. Do you think do you think this will happen? And B, do you think it's a good idea for Brett Yormark and the Big 12 to do this, to try to, basically get to an even playing field with the SEC and Big 10?
Well, selling the name Big 12, I think is smart, right?
Yeah.
Who cares? I mean,
they're 16 teams.
They're 16. There is no tradition left. Okay. I watched a bowl game this year where they took a live Pop-Tart and put it in a toaster, and it came out the other end, and the fans, the winning team ate it. Okay, so this is college. Spare me with the sanctity. If they want to call it the Phillips 66 conference and that helps close the revenue gap, go for it, right? Fine.
Do you think more teams will follow suit with that, or more conferences? I mean,
Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, if there's money to be had. Now, does the Big Ten, is it the Big Ten presented by Prudential or something? Probably. And that doesn't quite do it. But hey, you got to do whatever you can right now. So I'm all for that. Private equity, I'm interested. Is it private equity or is it private capital, right? Is it private investment? If it's look at we believe in college football as a growth industry. We'll give you, whatever, $100 million for your league a year, but you're going to pay us back. And that if they're take a controlling, like, can you sell 15% of a conference? Like, how does that even work?
Yeah.
How do you sell a public team? Like, all right, it's Oklahoma State. Like, who's selling it? It's a school.
Yeah.
It's a state school. Can you sell part of your school? I don't know. Like, that seems the private equity part, but if it's private capital, private investment, and they're saying, look, you guys, betting on football in this country is a good idea. Like, invest in football. If you're buying a stock and you say, yeah, I can get football ratings go up every year. Sports going to get more popular. This playoff's going to be huge. Gambling's getting to more and more states legalized. Like, I can see where private capital is sitting there saying, yeah, I'll invest in your thing. You're going to pay me back. You're good for it. These are, again, what are they going to go under? Like, even if the big somehow college football kind of falls apart, what, Oklahoma State's going to go out of business? No. So they can take those kind of things out almost as loans. But I think the Big 12 should do anything it can right now, and they're doing anything they can. They've gone to 16. They're trying to squeeze every dollar out and try to make it as competitive balance as they possibly can. And I think they'll do as well as the schools in that league have ever done. I mean, it's part of it's less like, well, we don't have the money of the SEC. Well, you never had it. Like, you never did. But that doesn't mean you can't be really good and competitive. One thing about all of this is they want to tell you there's only 2 conferences. There's too many good players for there to only be 2 conferences.
Yeah.
There's too many good football players. You can't create an artificial. This isn't the NFL where you just say this is you either make it or you don't. They can sit there and say, well, you're either an SEC player or not. You go, well, this guy over here is better than what you got. And he just happened to want to play for TCU, right? He grew up in Arizona, wanted to play for Arizona, whatever. It's too many guys. It's too many good players. So they're not all going to go to 2 leagues. So these other leagues have an opportunity to field teams that are more competitive than most of the teams in I mean, do you feel better about TCU football going forward or Minnesota football, right? Or like
TCU,
of course,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
They've always, right? I mean, Indiana football. Well, they've got money, but they're they're in the Big Ten. Miami, Florida isn't. Indiana will be better. No, they won't. Miami's going to be probably better, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of this stuff is just sort of like it's too much sports business and not enough reality. It's like you can have money, but I have Miami's recruiting base. I have Dallas Fort Worth as my recruiting base. You have Bloomington, Indiana. I don't care how much money you got.
Yeah. Do you think though that they would maybe stay aggressive and try to poach ACC teams with that if they?
I think in general, absolutely, if they could, but it depends on who. I just wish we had gotten to the playoff and gotten some. I would have liked to seen the Pac-12 go on.
Agree.
Getting too big doesn't really help. That's why I thought the Pac-12 was almost there, and I think if there was definite discussions before making the move for Oregon and Washington of like, well, if we just stay here, we're going to go to the playoff every single year, or we're going to be really in this mix. Like, this sets up really well for us. But it was still hypothetical. But I think if they had started this playoff 6-7 years ago and people are like, hey, I've got a good route to the playoff. We're playing enough exciting games. We have enough money to win. You might have been able to save the Pac-12. Maybe not. It's very poorly run, but at the same time, there was at least, I really hope we don't have any changes for a few years and we just see what the hell happens with this playoff and everything kind of settles down before we're just making these drastic, let's just destroy a conference move.
I completely agree. And look, you look at what we have today in college football. I think it's the most exciting year in my life, but at the same time, I can't stand the thought of an 18-team conference. I just can't. I'm just like, that's too big.
It's not a conference.
Yeah.
I mean, the AFC and the NFC each have 16 teams.
Yeah, well, great point.
All this is TV saying we're going to get you better. We're going to force good games. We're going to get more good football games.
But
and that is true. It is true because you're going to get Oregon playing Michigan and Ohio State stuff. Texas is going to be at Georgia, and they're going to have to play all these games. But they could have done this if there was real leadership with just a scheduling alliance.
Yeah, and like, yeah, you're getting more like front loaded for the big time college football fan. You're right. Georgia, Texas will draw a gigantic number, but I still think like Oregon State or Oregon, against Arizona State is will be a better number. Maybe I'm naive than Purdue and Oregon, because I just can't see why anyone would care. I love college football my whole life, and I'm just sitting there like, ugh. I'm like, I guess I'll be excited.
They care about is the big. They want as many gains as possible, as explained to me, that have 4 million or more. It's 4 million, 8 million, 10 million. How many 4 million plus games? That's where we make money. They can put any game on and get 1.7 million people to watch. I mean, Maction gets over 1 million every Tuesday night. So they kind of look at it. A lot of it is just filler. And then how many can we get the big matchups? And can we get 3 in a row on our net all day long? And that's what the networks wanted. And so they would prefer the only 50 teams are playing each other. Hopefully television doesn't get to completely run the sport, but that's what they care about. And so you're going to get more of those. And it's okay to be like, I wish the Pac-12 was here. I miss Oregon State or whatever, if they're not going to play anymore. But I am kind of excited about Texas, Georgia. That's
me too.
I'll watch. Yeah, it's like I don't want to be the one. That's it. I quit. Like all the people. I'm not watching this sport anymore. I dare you. You'll be watching. You'll be watching.
I need someone a TV exec to explain to me. And maybe it was you behind. You're a UMass grad. They got 3 SEC games on the schedule this year. What? Was there a 17th team? Was there a 17th team? And I missed the memo there. But how do they explain that?
Scared of us.
You're hosting Missouri. You might have a top 10 team in Amherst at the McGurk.
It's at Amherst? They're not even doing it in Foxborough? Man.
Amherst. I'm just saying, how do they explain that and then give us that? But
we have 134 teams in this sport, and that's what that is absurd. Okay. 134 teams competing for one title makes 0 sense. That's what's great about the sport. That's the chaos. And that's why when people are like, this is chaotic, it's crazy, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, no kidding. Neither does that. We have big state schools. We have little private schools. We have religious schools. We have military universities. We have big cities, cornfields. I mean, you got it all. You got it all. And that's it, all going for one title. Like, no one would ever dream this up. That's the fun part. Like, embrace the chaos and just be like, I don't know. Who knows? You know what? Every Saturday is a blast, and just watch it, enjoy it. And this season is going to be wild. It's, there are things we like, some things we don't like about it, but I don't know that I've ever been more excited about a season where I just have no idea what's going to happen.
I've been saying that we preview all 134 teams, do an hour for each team. And I've been saying for each episode, I go, I got no idea, like Saban leaves, Harbaugh leaves. And by the way, I love the narrative they were pushing on Dan Hurley. College sports is just, it's like, well, really? Bobby Ross never left for the Chargers after Georgia Tech. Calipari never left. Yeah.
Patino, Leonard Hamilton took Steve Spurrier left. I mean, whatever. It's just, they just want to trash the sport. I understand these ADs and these coaches are mad that things are different, and I understand the challenges they have in their day-to-day job, but I just don't understand why they have to trash the whole pursuit. It's just, why do I care? Why am I supposed to care that a guy making $10 million a year his job got harder? What industry in this country has not had change? Like, they go, well, this wasn't how it was 40 years ago. Tom Osborne. Well, what business is the same 40 years ago?
Exactly. It's
your salaries. This sport, everyone's salary goes up every year, and they have more jobs. There's more coaches, more associates. Everyone's rich. And they go, this is the worst thing ever to happen. We're doomed. Like, what? I happen to like it. I don't care. Work harder. I don't. Like, no one would listen about this in the NFL. No one would be like listening to your local NFL owner going, "Oh man, this is unbelievable." I mean, how are we going to make this work? I don't care. Play ball. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for hopping on the show, Dan. Folks, look, I didn't even get a chance to talk Tarkanian with you. I got to have you back at the college basketball
season. Special Tark episode.
Let's do that because, and look, that's just one of it. He's got like a series of books. He's got the superstar athletes one
epic
athletes with Patrick Mahomes and Steph Curry. And look, if you're going to a game and maybe your team this fall is going to get blown out, you can look. We have footage of someone reading Dan's book at the Florida State game when they were going through a tough time a few years back.
Young Seminole scholar there. Yeah.
Dan, though, I really appreciate you hopping on the show and always a pleasure. And yeah, I love it. The College Football Inquirer, folks. I'm telling you, as much as I like, subscribe to our show, but check out the College Football Inquirer because they do a great job covering the sports. And thank you so much for hopping on the show with us, Dan.
Thanks, Colby, man. Take care.
Dan Wetzel. Yes, that was great to have Dan on. I think he does such an unbelievable job covering the sport. If you haven't checked it out, check out the College Football Inquirer and check out all of his books. Like I said, the Tarkanian book, highly recommend as someone that grew up a big UNLV basketball fan. That team with Augment and LJ and everything. So check out that. Check out all of his books, though. He's just death to the BCF. Or the BCS. I remember reading that a while back and I thought it was fantastic. So check out all of that. And look, I want to talk a little bit more about what we talked about. But before we do that, I want to tell you that the college football experience is brought to you by Rhythm. If you're betting on NBA player props, then you need to download Rhythm. That's RITHMM. Rhythm is the go-to sports betting tool that transforms complex data into actionable insights, empowering bettors with smarter data-driven decisions. Unlike other platforms, Rhythm combines advanced predictive analytics with an intuitive user experience, making betting both easy and enjoyable. And Rhythm's predictive models were born from the brains of MIT data scientists and quants with over 3 years of data that help drive you to better AI-backed betting decisions. So what are you doing? Hop on over. Get a free 7-day trial period today at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. Once again, that's RITHMM. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. All right. We are back on the college football experience. Shout out to the chat. I see everyone rocking along. Connor's talking about his Beavs and that's the thing. I know that Washington State and Oregon State, I think, are the two spots where, you especially getting some clarity, Dan was able to clear up a little bit there. But I still think they might have a decent shot at running, running the table there. So, and Connor asked, what do I think happens with the Pac-2? I do agree with Dan. I think it probably merges. I don't know if those teams will come to the Pac and call it the Pac West or something, but or the Mountain Pac, whatever, or they end up there. But I do think that's their best. It's the best avenue for them. Maybe the Big 12. I've heard rumblings that maybe, but I don't know how much to believe in that. You see that tweeted out all the time. But I will say this though. I actually think potentially it could be a blessing in disguise. It could be a blessing in disguise. The reason why I say that is right now you're saying, hey, what that's just not fair. We had the Pac-12. Well, look, Washington State and Oregon State didn't necessarily win the Pac-12 a lot of years. You got to go back to like the 98 Rose Bowl when Wazoo and Ryan Leaf and Mike Price got it. I wonder long term, first I just alluded to on the show or the interview with Dan, that I do think they're going to have to expand very soon because I think the schedule discrepancies will create crazy fan bases going absolutely irate. And it's going to be some of the bigger schools. Before it was Cincinnati missing out on the tournament or the playoffs, or UCF or Boise. I just posed that in that interview that I think Texas A&M can have the same record as Texas this year, potentially, and they would win and Texas would be left out, but Texas's strength of schedule is way harder. And that's just one example. I think you could also go through the Big Ten and say that. And when that big fan base gets left out, I think that's going to really cause for them to expand, and not only expand, it's also you pair that with more money, they're going to want to expand, which means I think they'll probably have, more than one group of 5 spot long term. But my point is that I almost think Washington State and Oregon State would be better off. I think they have a leg up on a lot of the group of 5 from a talent perspective so I think if they were to join that, eventually, or have them join whatever happens there, they could make the playoff more frequently than they would in the Pac-10 or Pac-12, whatever. So I think that's something to consider. And I think right now, I get it. When the news first happened, I was devastated by it too, because I think Oregon State and Washington State are great, institutions, great for college basketball, great for college football, and I think in college baseball, and I think they should always be involved with the top. But I don't know that the top will matter as much moving forward. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I really had a great time, talking with Dan, and I started these conference previews. I've started these team previews, just on like June 2nd or something like that. And I'm going through all these teams, and I find my level of optimism for each and every one of these universities and the whole sport as a whole way much higher than previously. And that's because you never had, like I said, I have a sheet right in front of me right now. I counted 66 teams that I think have legit playoff aspirations, right? Like this year, I think they're going to be good teams, and they can potentially make a playoff. And that's not including the likes of Kentucky or Minnesota or Syracuse or Cincinnati that have all recently had big seasons. Syracuse, I think, had a 10 or 11 win season with Dino Babers. And they have a very favorable schedule this year. Kentucky won 10 not that far back. Cincinnati made the 4-team invitational just a couple years ago, even though it's a different coach and everything. I didn't include them as the 66, 66 teams, but that's what makes this season. I think it's going to be the most exciting. Like, I think Connor's hurt because of what happened to Oregon State, and I would be too. And I don't know, they might be the one fan base, Oregon State and Washington State, where it's the unknown, whereas I feel like the paths of other teams, but I put Oregon State and Washington State in there because I still think there's a reasonable shot. You've been used to playing. Pac-12 was really good last year. You've been used to playing Washington, who made the national championship, or Utah, or Oregon, or USC, or Arizona, who had a great year last year. And now all of a sudden you look at the schedule, and I see opportunity. Now I know Oregon State replaced a ton, but Washington State's got a little more continuity, but I still see opportunity for them. So I think, you should not just rule out the football season. I think there's an opportunity to potentially make a splash and maybe even find yourself into the 12-team playoff. But I just think that each conference race, going through this exercise where we draft 30 games on the college football experience week by week, this preseason thing that we do every year, the 30 games might not have been as strong as years past, which is, if you've listened to our show there, I certainly, say that. But I'll say this, the more the season ramps up, and especially once I go to preview these teams, the more exciting these matchups are. Like before, like a week 3 matchup of Memphis and Florida State or something had, you're rooting for the upset, but there's no real, punch to it. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, what if they might get Memphis could beat them and then have trash talking rights as a fan base. And, they could go to the AAC championship, but now it's like you win that. And not only is that really bad for Florida State's chances of the 12-team playoff if they lose, but Memphis, can really have that in their cap. And to me, the games become so much more meaningful, like Tennessee at Oklahoma is a huge game. I was just previewing the Vols the other day. And I think all of a sudden that game that before, you kind of realize that, hey, these teams will have a couple losses. Regardless, especially like in Tennessee's case, where now it's like, hey, you win that, like you way the schedule's constructed for you. I think you're looking at a team that's going to make the playoffs if they win that game. I really believe that. And I think it just makes the sport so much more exciting in each and every conference race, and the schedule discrepancies, I also think make it more exciting in a way. because of that, the schedule discrepancies that I was just talking about with Dan, I think it bids for a lot of opportunities for, like last year was Louisville and Oklahoma State. They didn't get it done. They didn't win the conference championships, but guess what? Texas is no longer there in the Big 12. So you got to think Oklahoma State would be a front runner to potentially win that thing and make the college football playoffs. And Louisville was in year one of Jeff Brom's era. So they're only going to get better. So to me, you think about just schools like that are all of a sudden going to have a seat at the table in the playoff and potentially be hosting a playoff game. It's just going to get this sport, to me, it's like giving it just steroids. It's going to become so much better. Each week we'll have major games that matter more. I know they push that lazy narrative that the regular season meant more before. It means way more now when you go team by team, game by game, looking at the preview. And I think that's why you should be excited about the future of college football. Obviously, Oregon State and Washington State would be the two that, you probably are the most weary because you don't know where the hell you're going to be. But the other ones, I feel like, and maybe the ACC fans, even with all that, I think you have a great reason to be excited about the future of college football, especially this year. I think this year is going to be just phenomenal. So, folks, that's our show. We'll be back previewing. The Mountain West on deck. We got Vanderbilt and Texas A&M to knock out, but the rest of the SEC previews are out there. Check out the College Football Experience. Check out the Stadium Heads podcast. Myself, Michael Barker, aka College Football Campus Tour, talking Mountain West stadiums, talking Pac-2 stadiums, talking. We went through the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, the Big 12. Go check out all those episodes where we dive into the history of college football and why college football is the greatest thing to ever hit planet Earth and why stadiums are amazing in college football. So check out all that. Stadium Heads podcast, FCS College Football Experience will be ramping up soon. Check out the Sports Gambling Podcast. Noah Beanick's doing a great job with the College Baseball Experience right now, and Moneyline Max doing a good job with the College Basketball Experience with a bunch of coaches on off-season check-in. Check out all of those. Get the SGPN app, and I can't wait for this college football season. You're going to hear me saying that all off-season because we still have to do our conference previews, and we still have to preview 120 teams somewhere, or 118 teams. So we're just getting started, folks. Until next time, folks, this is the College Football Experience. You better start thinking about yours, and we out of here. Run and shoot. We can really run and shoot.